Okay, there is one last thing I want to show you about scatter plots. So navigate to your scatter plot sheet, and remember that one of the most useful things about scatter plots is it lets you graph two essentially two different variables along each axis, so you can see in the transactions whether or not there's any correlation, any relationship between those two variables. You're essentially looking for a trend, a pattern. And Microsoft Excel does make it exceptionally easy to add a trend line to any of your scatter plot charts. So let's start here with the invoice price versus transaction amount. Just select the chart, and in the upper right, hit the plus button. The very bottom option is your trend line. Now there are quite a few options here, so just click on the arrow and then the more options. Let's move this over just a bit. Now, you can see that you have several different options for what type of trend line you think you have. Generally, I begin with a linear, but if you graph the data and you see that you may have some sort of exponential relationship, then you can certainly try those. You can see there's also a logarithmic, polynomial. You can even add a moving average if you so desire. We're going to stick just for linear for this example. And one of the wonderful things you can do is down here at the very bottom, you can actually display the equation of your trend line right on your chart. And you can also display your R-squared value, which is a measure of just how correlated these two variables are in your data. Let's see, and let's blow that up a little bit so you can see what's going on. Okay, so, with the trend line, you can see what your slope is here. You can see where your y-intercept is over here. But the primary value here is in the R-squared amount. Now, if you'll recall from your statistics class, an R-squared value is essentially, it lets you know what percent of the variation in one variable can be explained by changes in the other variable, by what's happening with the other variable. So in our case, we want to see if the invoice price, see how that changes as the transaction amount changes. And generally for an R-squared value, anything over 0.7 is considered a strong correlation. That essentially means at 0.7 that 70% of the variation in one variable can be explained by what's happening in the other variable. But with our example here, you can see that we don't even reach 0.1. We're at 0.0853. So the R-squared value here essentially indicates that there is no correlation between what's happening with your transaction amount and what's happening with your invoice price. So for this example, I wouldn't even add a trend line to this because this trend line, it's such a weak correlation. You don't want to give anyone who's consuming your analysis the impression that there is a strong correlation when there actually isn't. So you want to make sure that you provide them with context that this is essentially no correlation. For me, I would just remove the trend line entirely because there's no strong relationship there. Okay, and let's repeat the exact same thing on our pocket price versus transaction amount. So just hit your plus sign, go to your trend line, more options, and I'm not going to throw up the equation this time, just the R-squared value. Blow that up. Okay, and we're at 0.001. So, with the pocket price, there is even less of a correlation between it and then the transaction amount than what we saw with the invoice price. So once again, I would not include this on my chart because it's misleading. There's no correlation there. So, what we've demonstrated is that there is essentially no correlation between either the pocket price or the invoice price and your transaction amount. So where I would go from here on this project is I would start looking at different marketing variables. See where the relationship does exist. See what is actually driving your prices, and it's exploratory data analysis. You'll have to just keep looking at different combinations until you do find something that shows a strong correlation. But luckily, with Microsoft Excel, you can easily add that trend line and check the R-squared value. So we're all set there.